So lying or sitting, making yourselves comfortable. And just begin to see if you can imagine that no effort is required to listen to or even imagine what follows. Can you imagine what it would be like not to concentrate, neither focusing upon nor focusing away from listening to the following questions? Can you imagine that your imagination is very subtle and effortless and includes all your senses, not just visualization? And can you imagine letting your multisensory imagination respond however it may as you listen to the following questions? Can you imagine letting your awareness center itself on body feeling without excluding the senses of hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, mental activity, and the sense of time? And is it possible for you to imagine what it would feel like to sense the three-dimensional presence of your thumbs? And can you imagine now what it would feel like to experience the presence of your thumbs even more sensitively than you already are? Can you imagine what it would feel like if you were already experiencing the rest of your fingers as intimately as you're experiencing your thumbs? Is it possible for you to imagine what it would feel like if you could experience the presence of your thumbs and fingers and the absence between your thumb and fingers on each hand simultaneously? So the spaces between and the space of the thumb and fingers. And can you imagine the fact that your fingers are made up of atoms of matter? Can you imagine the reality that an atom of matter consists of millions of times more space than solid matter? Can you imagine that your fingers and thumbs are made up of atoms, clouds of tiny particles revolving around one another, floating in a vast space between the particles in every direction? Can you imagine that your thumbs and fingers are clouds of particles floating in space, right where they actually are, and surrounded by space and permeated by space? And is it possible to imagine feeling the space even more subtly and intimately? Can you imagine experiencing the space surrounding and permeating the clouds of feeling of all your fingers and your hands simultaneously? And can you imagine letting this sensation of absence and presence serve as a model for experiencing other portions of your body? Is it possible for you to imagine that the whole of your hands and fingers and wrists, filled with space, surrounded by space, permeated by space? And can you imagine this as intimately as you experience the space of just your fingers and thumbs? Can you imagine experiencing your forearms, your elbows, your upper arms, filled with space, surrounded by space, just as sensitively as you experienced your hands and wrists and fingers? And while experiencing your hands and arms and fingers, can you experience your feet and toes, your ankles, your lower legs and knees, and your upper legs as clouds of feeling, permeated by space, as intimately and subtly as you feel the space of your hands and fingers? Is it possible for you to imagine experiencing your hips, the region between your hips, your buttocks and pelvis, as a fog of feeling, permeated and surrounded by space? Can you imagine experiencing your abdomen and navel, the region between these and your back, and your internal organs as mists of feeling, permeated by space, surrounded by space? Can you imagine what it would feel like to sense your chest and back, the region between your ribs and all the organs inside your rib cage, permeated by space, clouds of particles floating in space? Can you imagine experiencing the three-dimensional presence of your shoulders, the region between your shoulders, as filled with, surrounded by, and permeated by space? And can you imagine experiencing this as intimately and subtly as you feel the space of your hands and fingers, feet and toes, arms and legs? Is it possible for you to imagine what it would feel like to experience your neck and throat filled with space and surrounded and permeated by space? Is it possible for you to imagine experiencing your whole body from the neck down as clouds of particles, surrounded and permeated by space, just as sensitively as you experienced your hands, your fingers, your thumbs? And see if you can imagine that as you inhale and exhale naturally, you experience your breath flowing into your head, behind your nose and eyes, filling the space. Is it possible for you to imagine, to feel these clouds of space filling, permeating, surrounding every aspect of your head and face, just as sensitively as you experience the space of your hands and feet? Can you now imagine sensing the whole of your body and head simultaneously as a cloud of particles, a fog of feeling, including a mist of emotion floating in space, permeated by space. Can you imagine feeling also the space in the whole room, in addition to the space permeating you and other people and the objects in the room? Is it possible for you to imagine what it would be like if it were really easy for you to rest in open focus at any moment? Can you imagine a narrow, absorbed attention, like you might in an everyday activity, surrounded by a diffuse attention, combining a sense of open focus with attention to a daily task? Can you imagine paying attention in open focus while thinking about or anticipating your day or your week, your month, or even your lifetime? Can you imagine paying attention in open focus while awakening in the morning? Can you imagine paying attention in open focus while dressing and preparing yourself for the day? Can you imagine paying attention in open focus while eating a meal? Or while driving? Can you imagine paying attention in open focus during work or meetings or talking to people? Can you imagine paying attention in open focus while walking across the parking lot, while being in the store and shopping? Can you imagine attending to open focus while writing or working at your computer or just thinking? Imagine attending in open focus while answering the phone. Can you imagine attending in open focus while listening to music or the radio or the television? Is it possible for you to imagine paying attention in open focus when paying bills, waiting in line, reading? Is it possible to imagine including open focus attention when feeling emotional or stressed, while experiencing pain? Is it possible for you to imagine that this is the end of this practice for this moment, today, but the beginning of practicing open focus for the rest of your life? And just for a moment, think about just one activity that you want to try to remember, to practice, bring in some open focus awareness into. And really see yourself in that activity. Maybe it's working on the computer, reading, taking a shower in the morning. Just think of that and then really imagine where you are, the colors in the room, the sounds, the smells. And then when we're done here today, make yourself a little note to just help remind you in those moments to just bring in this diffuse attention where everything is clouds of particles permeated and surrounded by space. And begin to bring yourself and your attention gently back into the room, wiggling your feet and your hands, gently turning your head from side to side. And see if you can keep a sense of open, focused attention while bringing yourself gradually up to standing, walking around, and beginning to engage again. Thank you.